In rotation 1, player positioning is as follows. The setter in zone 1, followed by the H1, M2, opposite, H2, and M1. The libero replaces the back row middle blocker. In serve-receive, rotation 1 provides more options than any other rotation. The most traditional formation has the H1 stepping back and passing in zone 1. She will be hitting a red. The opposite will hit a go, and the middle will hit a gap or a quick. When looking at overlap rules, this formation is legal as long as the setter remains behind the H1 until the ball is served. The opposite must be to the left of the M2 when the ball is served. Here's what it looks like. In rotation 2, player positioning is as follows. The H1 in zone 1, followed by the M2, opposite, H2, M1, and setter. The libero replaces the back row middle blocker. In serve-receive, rotation 2 provides only one good option when siding out. The H2 moves back to pass in zone 5 and hits goes. The setter moves up towards the net and stays right behind the opposite. This is nice for the setter because she's already right where she needs to be to set. After the serve, the opposite will step back and hit a red, the middle will hit a quick. When looking at the overlap rules, there are a handful of considerations to be aware of. The setter moves up in the court, but she has to stay behind the opposite. The setter also needs to be between the libero and the H1. All three of these back row players need to be aware of this. The M2 needs to be to the right of the opposite, but this should never be a problem as long as the middle is standing along the right sideline. Finally, even though they're passing right next to each other, the H2 must be in front of the libero, which of course also means that the libero must be behind the H2. Here is what rotation 2 serve-receive looks like. In rotation 3, player positioning is as follows. The M2 in zone 1, replaced by the libero because the M2 is now the back row middle blocker, followed by the opposite, the H2, the M1 who is now in the front row, the setter, and the H1. In serve-receive, rotation 3 provides some good options that can be utilized depending on who we want our three primary passers to be. Most commonly, the H2 moves back to pass in zone 5 and hits goes. The setter moves up into zone 4, almost to the middle of the 3-meter line. The middle attacker will hit a gap or a quick, the opposite will hit reds. There are a few overlap rules that come into play with this formation. The setter must stay behind the M1, and the setter must stay to the left of the H1. So the setter must remember to look at these two players and not creep too much towards the net or too much towards the middle of the court. The M1 needs to be to the left of the H2, but this won't be a problem if the middle stays on the left sideline. And when we're looking at our passers, the H2 must be in front of the H1. Here's what this formation looks like.